Hello and welcome to another episode of PsycKicks. My name is Liv, and as a psychic medium, this is my podcast where I talk about all things spiritual, paranormal, metaphysical, and in between. Because, talking to dead people and perceiving energy of existence starts to teach you a lot of things and makes you wonder and go, a lot. And that is the things that we talk about on this podcast. So today, I wanted to talk about two topics, of which one is the death of yourself and trusting your intuition, because I've been having a lot of, just aha moments about these things and thought-provoking thoughts that have crossed my mind during readings and my own personal just research and living life itself as a new mother, a wife, and a medium. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into those ideas, I'm going to give you all a life update because people seem to enjoy my life updates. And then if you're not interested in a life update because you don't really care to get to know me, which I respect it, you just want to hear some metaphysical, spiritual, schmack, then that's fine. There will be a timestamp in the show notes below or in the description below if you're listening on the PsycKicks Extras YouTube channel. Then clicky doodle down there and it'll show you Liv's life update. It'll be a timestamp and you can skip past it if you don't care, which is totally fine. All right, so what is new with me? One of the things I've been wanting to research as well, in addition to moon magic personally, is like ancestor work. And if you guys are new to spirituality, literally we have all these cool little terms in the spiritual community about stuff that is just also normal things, just with more of a spiritual faith driven type of mentality. And those things are we refer to processing trauma and personal therapy as quote unquote shadow work, which makes it seem really cool and mysterious, but it's literally just working on your own BS and the things that haunt you basically. And we call it shadow work because the idea of it is that everyone has a shadow, right? The light that shines on you casts a shadow. And when you're working through trauma and you're doing shadow work, it is working through the parts of yourself that tend to follow behind you, that you don't necessarily look at. It's hard to look at because every time you turn, it moves, that type of thing. That's the idea of shadow work, but literally it's just therapy, honestly. So if you're new to the spiritual community, there's a cool word for you to put in your pocket. And, when someone first told me about shadow work, I was like, that sounds mysterious and mystical. But when they explained it to me, I was like, you mean therapy? Oh, cool. So that is one cool thing. But one of the things that I've been wanting to learn more about is called ancestor work. And ancestor work is basically genealogy. Learning about your heritage, where you come from, your ancestors, the people that have lived before you in your family. So the spiritual term is ancestor work. And it is a little more grounded in energy and spirituality and not just research. But again, that's why there's a little bit of a twist to it when it comes to understanding things from a spiritual perspective. So I don't know a lot of things about ancestor work, but it is something that I want to learn more about, what people have already thought about and their ideas on it. And in our mediumship circle last week, we talked about a mediumship circle is just something on Patreon. So if you're interested in Patreon, go down to the show notes and check it out. But the mediumship circle is for it's for cloud plane and higher tiers. But Akashic Castle people get to watch the replay on Patreon. So you're not a part of it, but you get to watch it. So anyways, what we talked about was ancestor work a little bit, just in how we perceive it before we do research on it and dive more into that topic. And we were just talking about one of the things that as a medium I perceive is banshees and sirens. And one of my friends told me once that I have a past life as a siren, and they believe that. So as far as I understand sirens are energetic beings that exist between, they're kind of like a fae being, honestly, in my perception. Other people say that they exist between realms or realities, but I think they are just a fae being because fae beings technically as I understand it, the she different variations of fae beings exist between the space of physical existence as itself. So like technically you as a person right now, if you got rid of all of the dead space in between your atoms, the particles that make you up, your physical existence would be the size of a sugar cube. So in all of that space between physicality is the energy of the fae. They exist between the energy of physicality. So I think sirens exist as the energy between sound frequencies in different areas. So there's not just like the sirens that live in the sea, but there's also sirens of like just sound of different areas. So anyways, that not to talk about sirens, but one of the things that I always perceive as a person is banshees and sirens in certain metaphysical contexts. So like as a medium, spirit, whether it be spirit guides or souls that I'm talking to, will use things that I have an understanding of in order to convey information to me, because they can't show me something that I've never seen before or haven't used in my daily life to convey a message, because I wouldn't be able to see it. You can't imagine or see things that you haven't experienced or seen before. So they use things in the filing cabinet of my brain to explain stuff. And two symbols that they've used a lot, I've noticed, is banshees and the sirens. Banshees are kind of like the negative idea of a siren, honestly. They're like the woman in a white dress with her hair that's all tangly and gross and it's all over her face, etc., etc., and they like scream at you. They just like stare there and then all of a sudden they screech and they're scary. They're like used in pop culture movies and things like that. However, I've never put two and two together of that banshees and sirens actually come from Celtic lore. I find it interesting that I did not know that banshees and sirens come from the same lore, and this is the story in short. So, if a woman died tragically in Celtic lore, if her relationship with her family was good, she would come back as a siren to guide them. However, if the relationship with her family was bad or there was ill will between them and she died suddenly, she would come back as a banshee and guide them. So it's just in different ways in which that spiritual being or incarnation or flip side of the soul coming back is supposed to guide the family based on their relationship. And we can talk about positive and negative entities all day long, because technically there isn't a difference between them, because they're still there to help guide you and give you enlightenment in different ways. It's just like the yin and yang, or one side of a coin versus the other. But it's Celtic lore. And I, if you guys don't know, am Irish, Welsh, Italian, and Czechoslovakian. So my dad is Czechoslovakian, and I know Czech Republic and Slovakia are different countries now, but my ancestors come from when the country was one, which is why I say that. So if you're listeners from that area of the world, that is why I say it that way. But I've always been drawn to Celtic lore and that sort of like European area, the British Isles and things like that. And I think it's just because of my ancestry, physically. So I think it's cool that that is something as spirit would show me, because one of the other things I've been learning lately too is that your spirit guides can be not only your past lives, but people from your past lives, if that's something that you believe in. So if my spirit guides are an amalgamation or single past lives, or people that I've had past lives with, then that would be like people that could be ancestors as well. And since I have a lot of Celtic heritage, it would make sense to me that they would use those ideas to convey information to me. So I just like, I don't know. I feel like that's a really cool ancestry thing that's been going on. But the other ancestor work that I've been thinking about is I had a reading with a very fine person, and their grandmother always comes through when they have readings with me. And I've had 2 readings with this individual, like private readings so far, and they're lovely. But they have Filipino heritage. And, you know, like, I'm just a white girl with ginger hair with Celtic heritage. I don't know anything about the Filipino culture besides what lovely people have taught me from me meeting them. And for me as a medium, everyone has psychic abilities. If you want to dub yourself a psychic or a medium, that is cool. If not, that is okay too, because we're all just existing on this rock called Earth. But your way in which you perceive and channel energy, because that's what you're doing when you're perceiving metaphysical, spiritual information, whatever you want to call it, the paranormal. When you are channeling that energy, it's going to be different for everybody. And for me, I believe I sort of tune into a radio frequency. That is how I receive information. It's kind of like if you were to put yourself on a stanza of music and read that line. That's kind of what I do. Different songs or different souls exist in different stanzas and different phrases of energy. And that's kind of how I perceive how I am able to channel energy. However, other people channel energy differently. But for me, I've never figured or understood why other people think that there's like a song or dance that you have to do in order to talk to souls. Because for me, that's just not how it works, culturally and physically speaking. I've gotten on calls for private readings with people, and a couple people have gotten nervous because they're like, do you have to light candles? Do you have to like cleanse the space? Do you have to say a prayer? What is it that you have to do before we have a reading for you to channel and talk to the souls of my past loved ones? And I was like, I don't have to do any of those things. That's not how it works for me. I'm a potato on the other side of the screen, and I'm going to channel their energy how it works for me. And when I was talking to this lovely person who has Filipino descent or is Filipino, the question that he had for me was, I want to be able to channel the soul of my grandmother better. And I've noticed, because this person is very in tune or becoming more in tune with their abilities, they said, I want to know how I can better attune myself to channel the soul of my grandmother, because I know she helps guide me, but I feel like the connection isn't as strong as it could be, because I feel like when I go over to my uncle's house, I can feel the energy of my ancestors and more so my grandmother much more strongly. What is it that I have to do? And I was like, why? And I asked his grandmother, I said, why are you more present in his uncle's house, your grandson's uncle's house, than just when he's trying to talk to you? And her answer was incense. And I was like, incense? So I asked this lovely person, I said, hey, does your uncle burn incense for your grandmother? And he goes, oh yeah, in our culture, we have altars for our past loved ones, and he has an altar for my grandmother. And I was like, you got to have an altar or burn incense for your grandmother in order for her soul to present more strongly for you to talk to her. And that was just mind blowing to me, because as a white girl, ginger, Celtic, Irish heritage person that's a medium, I would not have thought those things, because it's just not how my gifts work. So it kind of blew my mind when this soul said, this is what you have to do in order to talk to me, because I've never had that perception of speaking to spirits that way. And her answer as to why that was pertinent in channeling her soul was because culturally speaking, it's important to her. Therefore, it affects her soul in that way. Does that make sense? It was just like, because she's a part of that heritage and that culture, if you want to talk to her, that's what you have to do. And I was sharing this with some of our patrons too, and someone had a very good idea. They're like, oh, well, that's probably how, for example, when you're channeling the soul of someone at a haunted location, or just when I do readings, sometimes souls don't want to step forward to me because they did not believe in mediumship when they were alive because of religious reasons, etc., etc. So it's like, it's harder for me to talk to them because they don't believe in what I do. So they're like, is that just the same but different of this person being able to channel their grandmother's soul because she feels that incense is what is going to bring her soul forward more, or is what's necessary for him to communicate with her in like a respectful manner? And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. So it's like, these are the things that I've been learning about ancestor work. And it's like, it's odd to me to think that you could have something physical in order to better connect with your ancestors or your past loved ones, because I'm not a physical medium, I'm a mental medium. So it's not something that would intrinsically cross my mind or innately, instinctually cross my mind as something that people would need in order to better communicate with their past loved ones or a soul or a spiritual being, etc., etc. And I was like, that's cool. So with ancestor work, I wanted to share with you guys in my personal life that I have successfully adopted my grandmother's cat. And I have been not wanting to say anything about it because I've been really nervous about integrating, his name is Gatsby, Gatsby into my house because I have a dog. Her name is Fennel. She is not an alpha. She is a Newfoundland. She just looks like this big old clunky bear with droopy eyes, and she just pants everywhere. And she gets along with just about anybody. She loves cats. She loves horses. She loves other dogs. She likes squirrels and bunnies. She's just the animal. She's like Eeyore if Eeyore was incarnated into a dog with a happier personality. But I wasn't so much worried about Fennel getting along with Gatsby, but I was more so worried about my cat Sniffles. I adopted Sniffles when I was interning with an equine veterinarian when I was in college, and I rescued her from a flower pot. And she wasn't supposed to be my cat. She was supposed to be my friend's cat, but things didn't turn out that way, so I ended up keeping her. And I've had Sniffles for almost 10 years. She has like gotten me through very, very hard times in my life, and I just adore her, and she's my little flower pot kitty. And the reason her name is Sniffles is because she was supposed to be for my friend. They thought the kitten that they had was a girl, but Winkle ended up being a boy. That was my friend's cat. And they wanted a girl cat to have a friend for Winkle. But then Winkle matured and they figured out he was a boy. And they're like, well, we don't have enough money to fix him, so we can't take the kitten anymore. And I was like, well, now I have a kitten. And when I got Sniffles, she was very, very sick. She had an upper respiratory infection. And because I didn't want to name her, every time I would go out to take care of her and nurse her back to health before she was going to go be my friend's cat, I would just be like, oh, hey, Sniffles. So it just stuck. But Sniffles is, I think God made Sniffles a cat because if Sniffles was not a cat, there would be like World War III. There would be another dictator that's like ruling a part of the world. And he was like, nope, you're going to be a cat because otherwise the world will have a lot of problems. And Sniffles just lives her authentic self as life, and she is the alpha of the house. Fennel knows that she's the alpha. My husband knows she's the alpha. And every couple years, Sniffles and I have to have a conversation of she is a cat and she's not the ruler of the house because without us, she would not have food. So, you know, she's a very strong personality of a tiny 12-pound creature. And I was very nervous about her meeting Gatsby because Gatsby is a boy. And Sniffles has been around other cats before when she was younger, but only for like a very small amount of time. And she's just ruled the roost for so long that I was like, ooh, I'm nervous. And my grandmother actually passed away at the very beginning of COVID, like January of the year COVID came out. So I think 2020. And she has her cat, or my grandmother had her cat. And my uncle ended up taking care of him for the past 4 years because no other family members could at the time, including me. So I was glad that my uncle got to keep him because I was like, listen, Ohana means family, and he's got to stay in the family now that grandma's gone. And about a month or 2 months ago, my uncle could no longer take care of Gatsby, and none of my aunts and uncles wanted to either, or my cousins. They either couldn't or didn't want to. And I was like, Ohana means family. We have to keep him. So after getting him all checked out in with the vet and up to date on shots and flea and tick medication and deworming and all this other stuff, he has now been successfully integrated into the house. And I'm excited about it because I don't know how, why, or if this is even real, but now with the idea of physical things being able to help people connect to ancestors or past loved ones, I feel like Gatsby is going to help me better connect with my grandmother because when I was alive, or not, because when my grandmother was alive, we did not have the best relationship. And that is just because of family. Like, you know, when you're a kid, you can't control the relationships you have with others because you don't have a car, you don't have resources. You can't just be like, take me to grandma's house or else, you know, that's not how it was. So I feel like I really never got to know my grandmother in the way that I wish I could. However, she's had 3 cats in her entire life. The first cat was Lucky, and Lucky was a black and white short-haired tuxedo cat. And then she had Jinx, and Jinx was a black and white tuxedo cat. And then she had Gatsby, and Gatsby is not a tuxedo cat, but he is black and white. And I don't know. I felt like I was going to have a black and white animal in my life for a couple months before Gatsby came into it. And I thought maybe they were going to be a dog, but now we have Gatsby, and he's a cat. And the only interaction that I've had with my grandmother since she's passed was I was standing in my kitchen one night and I was making food, and my grandmother grew up in the Depression. Or she didn't grow up in the Depression, but no, she did. She grew up in the Depression. And she had this thing that she would make for my dad called hot dog stew. It's literally, grab your pens and paper. It's hot dogs, brown potatoes, water, ketchup, and brown sugar, and onions. And she would make that with butter and just make like a sweet ketchup-y stew out of it. And I was making dinner one night after she passed, and I'd moved into my house. And I wasn't thinking about her, but I was thinking about her in the weeks before, because I was planning my wedding, and I always thought that she'd be able to come to my wedding at least, and I would be able to talk to her. And that didn't end up happening. But I was planning my wedding, so I guess I was thinking about her on and off. But I was in my kitchen making something completely different. And all of a sudden, while I was cooking, standing at the stove, I smelled hot dog stew. And I was like, it like infiltrated my thoughts. And I was like, why do I keep smelling this? I was like making tacos or something. And I was like, this does not smell like tacos. And then as I was trying to think about what it was, the idea of like, oh, that's hot dog stew popped into my mind. And then I felt like she was standing behind me. And I had this just like this clairsentient sort of feeling of acknowledgement and, hi, how are you doing? I'm here. But like in a very peaceful, not like I needed to ask questions, just like someone just checking in and it made you feel better type of thing. And ever since then, I haven't really had an experience with feeling the presence of my grandmother or talking to her. And it was just a very special experience for me. And now that I have Gatsby, I'm just like, okay, I'm glad that I can do this for you. And I don't know if it's going to help more in my ancestral work journey and trying to understand that as a medium and as just a person. But I feel like it is. I feel like it was meant to be. Like, we talk about timelines, or we've talked about timelines in parallel universes or alternate realities. And I don't think I necessarily believe in alternate realities or dimensions anymore. I think that alternate timelines, not dimensions, timelines. I think alternate timelines aren't necessarily a thing. I think what we were perceiving in those past podcasts and videos was the options that you have in order to get to whatever it is that is set for you. And I feel like 4 years ago, Gatsby could have been our cat and was supposed to be in our family at some point in time, but you have the free will. You have the options to say no to things, but whatever's meant for you is going to come for you or is going to happen for you. It just depends on what road you take. And I think the timelines or the things that we had interpreted as alternate timelines is actually just the options that you have that get you to a point in your life. And it's like these things can happen, but you're going to get to it at any point in time. And I feel like the options that I chose were what led me to having Gatsby now. So I don't know. It's just a lot of things that I've been thinking about that have been happening in my personal life. And that is what I wanted to talk to you about. So I feel like I could have just made that into a podcast, but we're also going to talk about these other two things that I want to touch upon that have sort of just infiltrated my mind as well through readings and things that I've been researching and listening to and just, existing with. So without further ado, these are the topics that I have for you. All right. This one might be a little bit heavy. Last week we talked about taking your own life and the things that I've been learning as a medium when channeling souls who have made that decision, etc. But I wanted to talk about this other thing that sort of came through in conversations I've been having with other people, both professionally and personally, and that is the death of yourself, but not in the way that you would think of. So, I, in the past, have struggled with suicidal ideation. However, I no longer do, and I'm very proud to say that because I think it talks about like where you've come from versus where you were, like your coping skills have gotten better. And even though you might be in a similar situation to where you might have had those thoughts before, you don't have those thoughts in the same way anymore. And that is like a beautiful thing that I've been thinking about. Like last Wednesday, July 24th was my birthday, and I turned 27. And I just thought it was interesting that I made the podcast that I did last week because I was inspired by a soul and their family member to share those things. But it's just interesting to think about like where I was almost 10 years ago and where I am now. And I feel like mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, I'm in a similar spot where I was 10 years ago while I was in college, like trying to get through college, trying to make ends meet, trying to grow and survive on my own in an apartment with my then fiance, and just like the doubts and trepidations and things that I had that worried me. I feel like I have now. I do. I feel like I'm worrying about the same things that I thought 10 years ago I wasn't going to have to worry about anymore, But it's just interesting to think about that 10 years ago. I mean, not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. It just feels like it's been so long. Anyways, 5, 6 years ago, Olivia was worried about the same things, but also 5, 6 years ago, things that Olivia was worried about that she was striving to have as a goal, I have now. Like I married the person I wanted to marry. I wanted to have babies. Now I have my first son. I wanted to be able to have a house. I wanted to be able to have a business and like be more self-sufficient, et cetera, et cetera. And I have all of those things. And it's like crazy to think about, but I'm also worrying about like where my next paycheck is going to come from, where I'm going to be able to buy things at the grocery store. Do I have enough money for that? Am I going to be able to put this money away? Am I going to be able to do this and that? And emotionally in my relationship with my husband and my son, like I feel like I'm going through that transition again of finding myself in this new season of life that I've worked so hard to get to. But it's like, even though I've gotten to the next step, the goals that I wanted to, I feel like I'm back in 5, 6 year ago Olivia mentality of where's this going to come from? I'm worried about that, and I'm worried about this, and I feel like this, and I don't know who I am in this aspect, and I feel like I'm this person in this aspect. And it's just like the only difference is that I don't have the same self-deprecating thoughts that I did back then of I should just give up. I don't. I like, even though I that thought crosses my mind of like, this is so hard. I don't want to give up anymore. And I think that's really beautiful to think about. And it's just something that I've been thinking about now that I'm 27 and I've reached this point in my life. I also feel like I shouldn't be 27. I feel like I'm like in my 30s or 40s, which probably is going to sound silly when I'm in my 30s or 40s thinking back on it. But I just like, I wanted to talk about to you guys all death of yourself, because I feel like you can die without dying. Does that make sense? I was talking to one of my very close friends now who I've just recently become close friends with when you talk about the grand scheme of things. And she was telling me about, I mean, she's a cancer survivor. She's also a religious trauma survivor. She's also an abuse survivor. And she told me that amongst all of these things that she had in her life, she had her husband, she had her children, but there was just so many things that were going on in her life that she said one night, I was tired of having surgeries. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I was in pain all the time. I felt like I couldn't be a mother to my children because I was so sick. Like I missed so much of their childhood because she was so sick. She said one night I was just so sad and I was so upset about my family and the things that they had done to me. And I felt like they had abandoned me. And with the cancer and the trauma of changing religions and all of this other stuff that she had been going through and was going through and felt like it was going to continue. She said, I got in my car and my kids were at home with my husband and I just drove. And she's like, and I thought that night that I was going to take my life. And I was like sitting there just like trying not to cry as she was telling me these things, because I know how she feels, Like, I've been there. That 5, 6, 7 year ago Olivia was there. I felt the same way. And she said, I drove to Walmart, and she said, I sat in that Walmart, and she said, I asked for her. She's Christian now. She was Catholic, and now she's Christian. She said, she's like, I asked God, I asked Jesus. And for me and anyone that's listening, that would be the universe, spirit, your spirit guides, your ancestors, whoever that is to you. She's like, I just asked them. I said, what is it that I need to do? I can't do this anymore. And she said, that night I did die. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, no, you didn't. You're talking to me right now. What are you talking about? And she said, I did die. She said, those parts of myself that I felt like I couldn't deal with, that my family didn't want, that I wasn't strong enough to persevere through. She said, those things died. Those pieces of myself did. She goes, and I walked away from them. She said, those pieces of me have died, and it's made way for new pieces of me to be born. And that's why I am here today as the person that I am. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. I don't know. That was so inspiring to me to think that sometimes we just want to give up, but we keep going. And that the death of yourself does not have to be an entirety. It can be pieces of yourself that you let go of, you let them die. And because you let them die, new things can be reborn in those places. And she said, since I've let parts of my family go, she said, I have had so many beautiful other people take their place as people that I feel, even though they aren't family, are family. And, the heartache and the sadness that I had because of the cancer that she had to survive and go through and fight. She said, I left those parts of myself that I felt like cancer took. She said, I let them die. And she said, and since then, so many beautiful pieces have grown in its place. And I just think it's so beautifully healing and poetic to feel and understand that you as a person in its entirety, when you feel like you want to die, you don't have to. You can just let go of those pieces that no longer serve you and move on with the rest, because new things will grow in its place. And that's something that I just wanted to talk about, because I feel like as I turn 27, I feel like there are pieces of myself that I no longer identify with. Those pieces from when Olivia was 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. There are pieces of Olivia from those years that I think I have kind of let die. And I'm okay with that, because I don't even know what those pieces would be. I feel like a lot of those pieces are fear. I feel like I'm not necessarily scared of things anymore. It's more that I have other emotions in place of it. I feel like parts of me that were full of fear, I've let just go. I'm like, well, I can't be scared of those things anymore, because I feel like fear comes from not knowing things. And if you don't know about something, then you're just scared of it. I think it's harder to be scared of things if you know about them, if you try to understand it. And I feel like I've been trying to replace things that I feared with understanding. And I don't know, something that I've been thinking about. Let me know what you guys think of the death of yourself or pieces of yourself in the comments below. If you're listening on the PsycKicks Extras YouTube channel, or if you're on Apple Podcasts, I don't know, if there's something you want to talk about, leave a review. I don't know how much space Apple Podcasts gives you, but sometimes it's therapeutic to write things out too. Just put that part of you into the universe in a way. But I'll read it. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes people just put things out on social media or comments, and they're not always the best things. But I've also thought to myself, like, why do people feel the need to express themselves in this sort of open-ended space? And I feel like it's still just the inherent wanting of a human to feel like they exist, like a Horton Hears a Who, You ever heard of the Dr. Seuss Horton Hears a Who? There's this elephant, and he carries around this little dandelion, and there is like a whole village of people on this dandelion, and all of these people try to, like, not these people. There's these people that live in the same size range as Horton, the elephant, And they're like, you have to get rid of that stupid dandelion. You're crazy for holding it. That's silly. Why would you hold onto this dandelion? It's just a dandelion. There's nothing on there. But Horton, because he has these big ears, hears all of the little whoos, or the little people that live on this dandelion, but no one else can hear them because they just aren't listening. So I feel like it's like the Horton hears a who sort of aspect of people just want to be known, even if other people can't hear them, because it makes you just feel good. Like shouting into the void. Sometimes you just got to go outside and like say something into the sky. I feel like that's the same thing as like social media, Facebook, etc. But I don't know. I think if you're going to do that, the person that is supposed to read it will read it, and it will hopefully impact them in some way. Like, why am I talking to you all right now on a podcast? Because I don't know, like Horton hears a who, it'll impact someone hopefully positively in some way, because otherwise it's just me talking into the void and by myself in a room. But anyways, okay, let's move on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, since I don't know, I guess this is going to be the reflection of turning 27 podcast. I guess that's what it's going to be. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was, I wrote this down on July 3rd. So I wrote down, people say trusting their intuition has led them to positive outcomes, but I feel that this is not for me. However, when I had this thought, Spirit corrected me and replied, but perhaps your intuition is right. Just because the outcomes are perceived by you as unpleasant does not mean that they're not meant for you. So I don't know. I was reading this book, and it's like a spiritual book, and it was talking about how the author wanted to make another book, not the one that they were writing that I was reading, but another one. And they were talking about how they didn't know how to publish a book or how to write a book, but all of these things sort of just fell into line for them. And it was hard, but it was great. And at the end of it, they trusted their intuition, and their intuition led them to where they were supposed to be. And it was beautiful and lovely, and everyone loved the book, and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, that sounds like a bunch of malarkey to me. Because I feel like I've been trusting my intuition with a lot of things in my life recently, and it doesn't seem to be going my way. And that is when Spirit was like, listen, quit being a sad bitch. That's not cool. And they were like, just because you perceive your intuition as being negative, the outcome of trusting it, doesn't mean that it's not what you were supposed to learn, what you're supposed to go through, because these quote unquote, as you perceive them, negative outcomes of trusting your intuition is probably just guiding you down the road that you're supposed to go in the long run. And, you know, I don't know, when you go for a hike, it isn't always like rainbows and butterflies and happy things. Sometimes you step in a puddle, and sometimes you get really tired, or I stepped on a bee yesterday. You know, I just like, if you're thinking about life as a path, you have a lot of different options that you can go down. Whatever path you choose is up to you, and no path is the wrong path or the right path, because it's just the path that is for you. But if you're going to segue or compare those things as like going on a hike, which is what I was just trying to do, I felt like I needed to clarify that for anyone that's listening, so it doesn't just seem like I'm going on a tangent about going through the woods and stepping in mud. You know, you go down a path when you're hiking to go off-roading because you're like, it's an adventure. Let's see what I can find. Let's see if I can follow these deer trails, if they go somewhere really cool, like what do the deer know that I don't know, type of thing. And you don't really know where you're going, but you're going down the path that looks the most beautiful to you, or the most interesting, intriguing, whatever it is for you. My husband will be one that just goes down and follows the trees that he just thinks look really cool. There's no actual path. For me, I love river walking. I don't know where the river's going to take me. Maybe I'll go upstream. Maybe I'll go downstream. Maybe, you know, whatever reasons, whatever path it is that you find interesting, you're going to take. But along the way, you might step on a bee. You might step in, I don't know, poo. You could fall down. You could have bugs biting you. But at the end of that trail, there's got to be something cool. A waterfall, a cliff. You get to the top of the mountain. There's this really cool like mother tree that you find, whatever it is. But I feel like just because you perceive the outcome of your intuition as being negative or not what you thought it was going to be, my spirit guides or spirit was like, screw you. They're like, stop talking negative crap. You've been talking about how you're trying to be grateful and notice all the positive things. Why are you having this thought cross your mind? And they were like, shut it down. And they did. They just said, just because what you perceive, your intuition isn't wrong. I think that was it too. Cause like, I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself. I'm like, I'm a medium. I can talk to other people. And I've had people validate that my mediumship is correct and I'm not just spouting things out of my pie hole. They've emailed me and been like, remember this thing that you told me about? It came true. Or remember this person that we didn't know who it was? I know exactly who it is. It's my great Aunt Betty. Like, so I've had the validation that mediumship is real and that I have abilities for it. But I just I'm like, why does it feel like I can do this for other people and I can help them, but I can't freaking help myself? That's like sometimes the most infuriating thing, I think, when it comes to my mediumship. I feel like I can't help myself. I can only help others. And my spirit guides were like, we're shutting this down because just because you feel like your intuition is wrong right now doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just where you're supposed to be at because it's leading you to the waterfall at the end of the path because I like water and that's what I'm going to use as my comparison. So yeah, I don't know. That is just to summarize. We talked about wanting to give up, but you keep going, and that the death of yourself is not entirely you. It can also just be pieces of you that fall apart, that you let go of in order to rebirth new parts of yourself. I think of it like a forest fire. Sometimes a forest fire, that's what I wrote my thesis on in college. I wrote it on holobiomes and forest fires and how if we can understand the root structures of trees, hopefully we can reduce forest fires naturally, or just understand how fires actually help root systems. And if you let a forest fire happen, you're not going to have as many in the future type of thing. Like actually fire prevention and forest fire prevention is actually making forest fires worse. It's a big thing in the scientific community. But anyways, with forest fires, things that burn, there's actually, I know this is going to maybe blow people's minds, but in forest fires, there's actually they call it like a pyromantic mycelium or mushroom that it's in the bark of trees and it's in the wood of trees and it's in the root systems of trees. But unless a forest fire takes place, this mushroom will not grow. But if a forest fire happens and it moves and plants the spores and triggers the spores of this mushroom to grow, the forest will come back tenfold beautifully. And I can't remember the name of this fire triggered mushroom, but it's super important. And it's just when it comes to the death of yourself, think of it like a forest fire. Things will burn, but it's weird if you watch a forest fire, not all things burn. Some things actually just remain green depending on however the fire burns or the things that are being affected. So I don't know. That's kind of what my spirit guides show me about it. When you think of the death of yourself, it's not always as a whole. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was just to summarize that we talked about trusting your intuition. People say trusting their intuition has led them to positive outcomes, but sometimes I feel that that's not true. And then spirit was like, screw you with your negative thoughts. And they said, perhaps your intuition is right. Just because the outcome that you have right now is perceived by you as unpleasant does not mean that this outcome wasn't meant for you and that it's not going to lead you down the path to whatever it is that you really do want. So I feel like that's your instant gratification or short-term goals versus long-term goals. Just because a short-term goal doesn't go you think it's your long-term goal, it's actually just a short-term outcome for a long-term goal. But anyways, that is the stuff that's been on my mind lately and the things that spirit has been helping me to understand and realize. And I hope that somewhere in the universe, for the people that are listening, that had a positive impact on you. So let me know in the comments below. I do have availability for personal private readings. They're always over Zoom for August. and also email readings. I have a lot. Email readings don't really have a time frame. I just will answer with your email reading questions. There's 3 questions and 5 questions in a month or less. So if that's something you're interested in, go down to the show notes below and click the link. I'll also start to have availability for September too, if you so choose that September is better for you. So yeah, thank you all for listening. Until next time, peace.